Now, the HST has been big news in BC, of course. What's your opinion of this tax, and did it have the impact that we all feared it would prior to July the 1st?
Well, my opinion of the tax is, I'll keep that as my opinion of the tax. I think the HST was, unfortunately, a lot of misinformed as far as it goes for the real estate sector. I think initially, they were not telling the clients really the truth. I think most consumers, unfortunately, thought HST was applicable to every home, and I think that was kind of what happened in the summer of July and August. And then the real estate associations did a good job of actually explaining, no, it's only applicable on new housing. It's not applicable on resale housing. Essentially under 500,000, there's really no difference between the HST and what GST and PST was beforehand. So I think they've gotten a good message out for that. And I think the developers and the new home projects are the ones who are getting more of a handle. We see a lot more times now HST is included in the purchase price. There's different programs, that incentives that the new developers are taking on. So I think initially HST had an impact, absolutely. I think it definitely created a huge rush of people buying to get into the marketplace, which created a big boom of activity in May and June. And then I think it definitely slowed down the marketplace in July and August. But as we're seeing now, people are getting used to it. They're understanding about it, and I think there's programs and great programs in place to compensate for the HST.
Do you think there's a housing bubble in BC?
No, I don't think there's a housing bubble in BC. And the reason I don't personally believe there's a housing bubble in BC is that prices have already adjusted down. They are being negotiable by the sellers. But the key difference is a housing bubble, in a lot of people, I talked about this briefly this morning at another meeting, is that the American style housing bubble, you have to understand, happened because it was unregulated. There was basically no guidelines of lending, and so essentially anybody with a heartbeat could get a mortgage, and of course they could buy a property. And in addition, there is no recourse laws in a lot of the states, and that's a big difference. People could go into foreclosure, give their keys away in the morning, and go out and buy a new house the next day, the same day. So I think that's a big difference. In Canada, everyone's qualified under the guidelines. You have to have a credit history. You have to be working. So I don't see that happening. There is recourse laws. If people go into foreclosure here in Canada, essentially they have to declare bankruptcy, and it affects them quite dramatically. So I don't see a housing bubble. I've seen what's happened is a great correction. I think we've seen, people. It's coming more into a buyer's marketplace, and I think what's happened is the lowest interest rates now being in the lowest rates we've ever had in Canada. They're at the lowest rates we've ever had, is helping soften the blow on there, and I think it is creating more now of a flat line of pricing, and also inventory is coming down. So if you talk to most of the agents, the inventory is starting to come down. So it's not as high levels as we saw during the summer peak. So I think we're coming into more of a flat line of sort of pricing points on that part of it. But the Canadian banks have done a good job. They are still lending a lot of money out. They still want to lend a lot of money out. And I think that's very important. And us as Canadians should be very thankful we have such strong lending institutions.